I've got a new light. Can you tell? Hello there, I'm Greg and I'm making a wall art sculpture portrait of Bella Baxter from Poor Things. Poor Things is a film of this novel by Alistair Gray. As soon as I heard what it was about, I bought the book and read it and have no regrets. In the production team's own words, it's the story of what if a woman could make herself from scratch. Emma Stone plays a character who is resurrected, shall we say. She's got a baby's brain and she gets to start life as an adult woman anew in a Victorian era society. You'd think it would be she's crazy naive and everyone around her is incredibly uptight, but it's not quite as simple as that. It's a film for grown-ups. That big 18 certificate came up on the screen and I thought, it's been a while. It's complicated and I think it's beautiful. It's challenging. There are some big choices, but that's Yorgos Lanthimos for you. It's funny, it's difficult, it's sad, it's true, it's sexual, it's magnificently brisk, funny, dirty and brainy. A feminist parable, witty, moving and genuinely eccentric. And it's visually so sumptuous. The design, my word. It's a Christmas cake of rich, rich visual density. And as soon as we saw it, what I was planning to make for my next project went aside, and instead I did this. For this recipe you will need, or you might not need, but I've gone through for hours, like afternoon and an evening, going through all my bit boxes and thinking, does this feel Poor Thingsy? Some of it's Baroque, some of it's Art Nouveau, some of it's old, not steampunk, but old-fashioned technology in the Frankenstein style. This is a construction of what I think the base is going to be. Half a Christmas tree bauble, a kitchen sink plug hole strainer, a cocktail stirrer, a chess piece, some old guitar pickups that are nice and rusty. Rust isn't quite part of the film aesthetic, so I've got to decide whether they're right or not. This picture frame I'm going to use. This is the first ever Valentine's card I got for my wife. Obviously I'm going to keep the card, but this ornate frame, I'm just going to keep the colour it is, the texture it is, preserve that. And then, because in the spirit of the film it needs to be an aesthetic mishmash, is a gauche way of putting it, but jarring juxtapositions of things. M&S biscuits for cheese. Someone's doing alright. This must have been at Christmas. We would never buy crackers from M&S any other time. The one thing I wanted was an ornate frame that was maybe an oval rather than a rectangle, and I saw this. So I'm going to apply some kind of texture to that. Then for the Frankenstein dome, I'm going to use hairbands as miniature cable. I've got a single light because I want the whole thing to light up and flash. I've got a mixture of washers for the various head fixins. I did think about doing a sort of winged animal head. Strange hybrid animals are part of the movie. But maybe not, that might be too decorative. Definitely pipes though. I wanted to use this pipe straw kit for a while, so there's going to be a pipe network around it. This is an old bit of picture frame. It will have a horizontal stage for the character to sit on. Possibly an old picture frame, or I might cut this across there when my new rotary tool arrives and use that as my little stage. Birdcage. I don't want to imply the character is in any way in a cage, but I do love the aesthetic of safety glass. You know, industrial glass with wire mesh. So I'm going to use this. Did I say bird cage? Bird feeder. It's a nut cage, if anything. Then she will be on a background of, this is a copy of Grey's Anatomy. So the character will be on a flashing light box of anatomical drawings. I might use this croissant packaging. Combining that grid with this grid might be too much. But it's layers, you know, it's layers. And it's art, not design, and that's fun. Baby food nozzles. We've got a friend collecting these for us. COVID test nozzles and little black pipes. Don't even know what they are, but they're exactly what I need for this, so good for me for keeping them. These drawer handles that have a kind of airship, slightly jet age, but still brass. Something about that. The whole film pulls between romance and elegance and industry and science. So here you have little decorative knobs. But then I've also got this box of lovely valves. That's quite nice. Again, a bit steampunk, so maybe not quite right, but they're just so pretty. Tiny push-button switches that happen to be basically miniature versions of the cable mounts on the glass dome. Yeah, very excited. But first, if you're doing a portrait, you need some paper to put it on. So, as well as using Grey's Anatomy for the science part, the film is also about travel. And I've got old map, old graph paper, so I'm going to try to print on these things without destroying my wife's printer. So I need to prepare those on paper for printing. So we start with the face. All I've got are 2 screen grabs from the trailer. Took that image into Photoshop, and using the clone stamp tool, where you copy bits of the picture over other bits of the picture, I basically removed the head bowl, the reflections, the table around her, and made this image that I think is rather lovely, and then distorted it in layers. So the bottommost layer, the shoulders and the hair, have dot matrix circles filter applied to them. So it's printed circles out from the center of the image, and I did them smaller and smaller for the face, so the face would have the most detail. Then a solid layer of glue stick to stick them very firmly onto this quite thick paper, and I also put some tape over the edges because my wife told me the edges of the paper are what will mess up her printer. So we've got the hair as the bottommost layer on a page of Grey's Anatomy, the shoulders on an old map, and then the face is printed on some old graph paper that, again, I've had for years and years, my catchphrase. Cut them out geometrically, just with straight lines, didn't want it to be photographically neat or anything. Then the bottommost layer I've stuck on a cork placemat to make sure it's rigid and stiff, and all the other layers are built up with little pieces of black EVA foam, just as a spacer that's quite dense but also quite light. And there you have a nice 3D relief effect. Used my flush snips to cut through this bird feeder, and then thought, I wonder if you can just cut it with scissors. You can. So this ends up not being on the top, it's underneath, it's part of the Lightbox, but this rectangle fitted so perfectly into the frame they couldn't not be used. So the only thing I disliked about the bird feeder is it was red, so I'm just stippling on some black acrylic with a sponge, and then some pewter, a warm silver, and just sort of pouncing it on there. This Grey's Anatomy anatomical drawing layer was an interesting challenge. Because it's a Lightbox, it can't be layered all on top of each other like a regular collage. It has to be one layer of paper thick. So I very precisely had to cut round things and work it out like a jigsaw, then stick them down to some sticky back plastic, and now I'm just putting some on the back as well, so it's now laminated between 2 bits of sticky back plastic. Then I'm going to use this very bright LED torch lamp thing to light it from the back. And as I say, the order of those Lightbox images will change, because I realised that you can have things that are revealed when the light is on, but are not there when the light is off. This is croissant packaging, quassies I call them at the moment. So we had a box of quassies. It wasn't quite big enough, so I cut it into 2 pieces and just put a bit of sellotape down the middle, because it's going to be behind the head, so you won't really see the join, and it doesn't matter. Painting! Here's my beloved box of various ages of spray paint. Old spray paint tends to spit out in little freckles, so always keep it. This is an aqua greeny blue, which is more the blue from the film, not the sort of Sports Direct blue that this picture frame is. And then I'm also spattering it with this sort of seafoam pale green, thinking, whoop, that's a bit bright, and spraying some more of the aqua blue over the top. It's 1 can in each hand, and you just layer up and down to get some kind of texture into this very plain blue picture frame, and attach the blue frame to the old frame with 4 screws. I hope this sort of post-apocalyptic Fagin cosplay fingerless glove aesthetic isn't challenging for you. My wife bought me these very lovely thermal fingerless gloves, and it was very, very cold up here, so we will see those again. This is my new rotary tool. It's a Tack Life, not a Dremel, and this metal disc I decided was a bit more laboratory, just in keeping with the aesthetic of the film. I think it's the metal from an old cafetiere coffee pot that I broke. So I cut that in half, and that is now the little stage on which Bella sits. This is using my centre punch because I decided that the edge of the biscuit tin lid was a little plain. So I'm going all the way around and drilling 24, it turns out, little holes after pilot holing with my centre punch, which just holds the drill. It's a great tool. And I'm using split pins, which are a bit sharp and a bit rattly, so I'm just covering the split pins on the back with hot glue to hold them in. Right, let's make up some texture technique. This is Trim Fix adhesive, it's spray glue, which you normally use for sticking textiles and leather to things. It creates just a layer of glue. But I thought, if I go Trim Fix, then sprinkle on baking soda for some grain and some grit, then you need to hold that baking soda on, so this is clear lacquer. I want it to look like a sort of metal tin sign that's been painted over 100 times, and it is the peachy pink of the house that they live in the movie. So that was an ivory undercoat, so it's a warm white, then some very bright pink I had left over from some other time, and then this kind of roast turkey brown, which, as I said before, sort of spits out in little freckles of paint. So you get a texture that I'm very happy with. I really like that. I think it worked nicely. Mod Podge, not Mod Podge, Mod Podge I'm using for the first time. You see it on YouTube a lot. It is a bit better than PVA glue. They're right. This is matte Mod Podge. It's a bit tougher than PVA glue. It's less plasticky, and it just needed a layer to hold all that texture on. Then once that was dry, 4 screws, and this extremely heavy frame is now all one piece. Cut out a little window for me fob light. I think it's like a head torch light. And then I thought, I've seen this before with a light up section or a light box. People line it with silver to make it more reflective. I do wonder if white would have been better. You tell me, is white better reflective for the inside of a light box rather than silver? But anyway, I've got some silver tape which I love using, so it's silver. Then, as this light box is very shallow, we need to diffuse this light as much as we can. So first thing I thought, I will just roughly, no not roughly, lightly, the opposite of roughly, lightly sand this torch. Make the plastic slightly more opaque. Then hold it in place with hot glue on the back. Good old hot glue, I'm going to call it. Particularly make sure it goes over the corners just to hold it on, but it doesn't go over either the charging port on one side or the button on the other. There. Nice. More diffusion, just taping a square of tracing paper over it on the front. There was a magnet on the back, but I cut and sanded that off to make it as close to the wall as possible, but then so as not to scratch the wall, I stuck on this little tab of EVA foam. Nice. Finally, the head bulb, the headgear, the machine. These are the cable holding nodes that are on the outside of the orb. These are some small, tiny little push buttons that I bought just entirely for something else, which have the right sort of shape and texture. So I'm cutting the buttons off and then using the hexagons. Yes, the bases should be round, not hexagonal, but this is art that's inspired by, not a replica of anything. Then for the plates either side of the head, I just had these plastic pegs. I don't know what they're from, but they're a tube mounted on a disc, but the disc is slightly too thin. So I'm just very precisely dabbing on some little bits of super glue and building them up with various sizes of small washer. Ah, the globe. We're going to have a journey with this globe. Oh, it was nearly perfect, and then, yeah. So I cut it with my new Tack Life rotary tool, and I'm just sanding the bottom edge. I thought to get the two head pegs in line with each other, it might be quite clever to put a beam all the way through, build up all the discs that you need, and then once they were stuck in place, cut out the middle. So even though I have some metal rod, I'm not using metal, I'm using a bamboo skewer, which I'm now going to wrap in brown paper tape to make it slightly thicker, and then very carefully roll it in aluminium foil. So it looks like a metal rod, but it's a rod that once it's in place, I can just very easily cut it. I was quite proud of myself for thinking of that. This aluminium foil is great for chroming things quickly and easily and dryly. So yes, feeling very pleased with myself, very proud. This fits perfectly through there. The beam is now exactly the right thickness to go through the pegs and everything. So I super glued all the discs in place, used a very precise nozzle pipe just to apply a little bit of super glue accelerator just to hold them. Then it was all done. I was about to dash downstairs and show my wife this great thing I'd made. Then I thought, oh, there's a couple of spots of super glue activator there on the dome. So I'll just wipe those off with one of my workshop wet wipe things. Turns out those industrial wet wipes I bought are slightly abrasive. So I totally scuffed up the inside of the dome. And exactly where the face is, it went scratched and opaque. So I did try, as you can just about see, I put on a layer of my clear crystal lacquer liquid, which if you want a slightly mottled vintage glass effect is great. I used it on my Brain of Morbius jar, but this isn't that. This is clean scientific apparatus. So after getting ever so slightly miffed with myself, I went online and bought a 20-pack of 8cm Christmas baubles and paid a fair amount for them to come the next day, because I wanted this mistake to just go away by 1 PM tomorrow. So here I'm rebuilding, using the original dome as a sort of template and being much more careful to cover the whole dome in painter's tape and masking tape and keep it from scratches. So I now have plenty of spare domes, because only 7 of the halves out of 40 broke in transit, so that's good. I want a partial refund and I'm not going to get a partial refund. This is very, very thin detail tape. There are these two attachments with rings around the outside on either side of the dome, so I'm just putting 4 strips of this very precise detail tape around some tube, and then I'm going to cut that tube in half to make 2 small ringlets. And I've nothing more to say on the matter. Then after the ringlets there are little cones out of which the cables come. Again, this isn't screen accurate, but it's very much inspired by, and I thought, well, I've got this 100 pack of superglue nozzles and they're slightly flared, so I'm going to cut off 2 little bits of cone. Then I had bought and prepared and snipped these black hairbands, but we were in the shops and I saw these brown ones, and I thought brown is better than black, shows up detail more, it's less bold in contrast with the rest of the frame, so I bought brown ones instead. As I've said before, if you've got a very synthetic material that's frayed, hit it with a flame and it will melt. It will melt tidy. Melt it tidy, keep it clean. Lightning, a little addition to the Lightbox. As I said before, I came up with the idea that you could have things that are visible when the light is on, but not visible when the light is off, which is quite fun. So these are some leftover bits of teal lighting gel, in fact leftover from the lighting gel I've got on that light right now. So I just cut out roughly some lightning bolts, sellotape them onto the back of a rectangle of tracing paper. So it goes bird feeder mesh, tracing paper lightning bolts, anatomical drawings, layer of quasi packaging, piece of clear acrylic rather than glass. I don't like glass frames anymore because I've posted a few of them out from my Etsy shop and they break. And then this is a clear disc from some old DVDs or CDs, just a clear spindle which has a nice radial line, slightly headdress quality. Holding the dome on through the little bauble peg using what's actually a black screw that I coloured in brass with a metallic pen, and then I'm just dipping the ends of these cables in some super glue and putting them in where they go. I can tell this was the last day and I was just wanting to get it done because there's a lot of details about it without filming it. So those node things on the side are metal cocktail stirrers put in through 2 pieces of toy microscope, and there's a lovely vacuum tube, I call it a valve, it's actually a vacuum tube, on the top. Then finally, we are mostly an oat and soy kind of household, but my wife made me a rice pudding cake for my birthday, so we happened to have some milk in. And this plastic I thought was exactly the right material for the shower curtain-esque rubber sheet that lies across Bella's shoulders. So the last thing I wanted to do was cut out a strip of these, hold them on with some nice flathead brass screws, and the portrait is ready for its unveiling. Before we see the finished thing, my YouTube channel recommendation is Queen City Minis. Tiny, incredibly precise miniature work with lots of good weathering details and suggestions for materials to make things out of. And she really, really makes me laugh. In a very dry way, very calming, just, yeah, a channel I've been enjoying a lot. Speaking of women who make me laugh, segue, let's have a look at the final thing. So yeah, it's a film I loved. Watch the film and read the book. There's a very important narrative, literary element at the end of the book that's missing from the film. So I recommend reading it. It's complicated, as are we, and that's what it's about. It's about life. So it's a hard recommend from me, as long as you're over 18, because it gets pretty real. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Lots and lots of love from me, and I will see you soon.